have to, like, do the video. Kind of forgot about that bit. So yeah, you read the title. That's what I think. Out of the theater, I really liked it, but I also thought of a rewrite that I think would make it infinitely better. So, you know, I watched Deep Focus Lens. I watched her video reviewing Conclave, and I really just didn't agree with it. Like, I mean, obviously, it's very subjective because it's a spoiler-free review, which I don't really like spoiler-free reviews, to be honest. Because, I feel like you're already, by reviewing the film at all, you're already spoiling it and, influencing the person's opinion. Whatever. I just don't really like spoiler-free reviews. I don't really like looking at reviews before I watch a film. But yeah, her review was really subjective, but I felt like it was pretty, I just didn't really like where it was coming at it from, because it was and this film, very kind of Oscar baity? Yeah. Is it, pretty serious? Yes. But I don't see how that's makes the film bad. Maybe it's why you don't like it, which is fair. I didn't like some of it also, which I'll get into, but I feel like the critique of saying that it wasn't as deep as it was pretending, because her review is very much saying that the film didn't explore faith that much, or saying that it didn't explore the divide that well, and that the characters were kind of one-dimensional, which saying that a character is one-dimensional, I find sometimes can be a bit of a poor critique. In reality, you don't really want your characters to be that multi-dimensional. You don't want them to have all these different things going on. I mean, you do, but you want one thing to kind of be the focus, at least in my experience. Films that I really, appreciate, you kind of want to hone in on one part of their character and explore that. You want them to have vertical depth, not horizontal depth. You don't want their character to have a lot of different things going on. You want them to have a lot going on in one area, and who they are as a person stems out into the situation they're in and what decisions they make. On the way to the theater and back, I was listening to Ka's album, The Thief Next to Jesus, and I kind of want to tie that in somewhere, but it won't really fit in this review, because that album's about faith and the church, and this film isn't really about faith or the church. That's the setting, but it's not really exploring the church or faith with much depth. That's not really what I think the film is about, per se. And that could, I don't know how accurate it is at all, how accurate its depiction of the church is, and so that could turn some people off if it's very inaccurate, which it could be. Like I said, I just don't know. To go back to what I was saying, Deep Focus Lens, her video was very this is, it's kind of hollow, or it feels like she was calling it pretentious, or saying that it's pretending to be deeper than it is. But I don't really find that to be a thing. I don't find that to be a real criticism. I get that stuff might feel that way, but I feel like that's just people going, this thing was trying too hard, which I don't think is a valid criticism at all. And again, I just don't think the themes of this film, I think it's that maybe people wanted it to be about faith and wanted it to have deeper themes, when it's really, when in reality it's really just about our main character and his kind of journey, and it does tie into faith and the church, but it isn't at all specific. I feel like that's people's problem, is that it didn't depict religion or Christianity in a nuanced enough, or it didn't depict, the liberal versus conservative kind of divide nuanced enough, or it didn't depict elections nuanced enough. But I don't think any of that's what this film is truly about. That's all, again, like I said, vertical depth. Those are settings that are used to tell a story that I think is ultimately about um, taking control, standing up for yourself, what you think is right, and taking action. Uh, Lawrence, Ralph Fiennes' character, by the way, I think he did a great job. I don't really know shit about acting, um, but I think he did a pretty damn good job. The scene, like, towards the beginning when the Pope died, and it's like we barely know anything about the story, and when he starts tearing up over it, his character starts crying over it, that immediately kind of got me hooked, and it's really hard to get me invested in moments, very emotional moments, when I know nothing about the characters. But I think for me, what really gets me in is moments that are conflicted, that aren't just happy or sad, where there's kind of multiple things going on. And I guess when we don't know everything about a character, the moment becomes, it's very, when we don't know everything about a character, emotional moments can be, we don't exactly know everything that's going on in their heads. They can be more interesting. I didn't know how, him tearing up, I didn't know how much of that, like, obviously he's very sad about it, but I didn't know if he was at all, like, happy that he might, be moving up or something. I didn't know. I think in retrospect, it's very much just kind of, it's sadness at the Pope dying, but then also emotion over him realizing that he's going to have to step up and do this. Or maybe he didn't know that at that time. Also, I think maybe just fear of change. I haven't, this review is going to get into Enneagram stuff quickly, because I think that's the best way to understand characters, but I'll explain it for those of you who don't know. I haven't pinned down if Lawrence is a 5 or a 9. And again, maybe I'll rewatch the film and find that I'm totally off about this, but I think he's a 5 or a 9. I feel like he's a 5 because I relate to him, and I'm a 5, and some of what's going on in his speech about doubt is so very 5. Maybe he's like a counterphobic 6 or something. I don't really know. I feel he feels like a 5 to me, because him getting up there, him being very passionate about, oh, you want to be doubtful, to me that feels like a very 5 conviction. Anyway, I just realized I talked about Enneagram without explaining it. So, I'm going to say Lawrence is a 5. So basically, he's scared of the world and of change and all these uncomfortable kind of situations. So he likes to kind of hide into his mind and his ideas, where he knows what the way things work. He's trying to become very competent and confident by knowing a lot. And I think that may have manifested in, like you said, in this doubt of faith, and just in general, where he doesn't know exactly what's going on, and he filters everything through that lens. And he's very confident, and that lens really helps him feel better. But again, like when he's crying when the Pope died, obviously that's a very sad moment, but also I think it's him kind of, he really doesn't like, at least at the beginning of the movie, he really doesn't like these kind of moments of conflict, and he prefers to kind of just hide into his mind, where he knows what he thinks the good would be, but he doesn't like to have to act on that or do much. So then the first moment of growth comes when he just gets up and makes his speech about doubt. And that was a very satisfying moment for me. Subjectively, I enjoyed it a lot, and I think that's because, like I said, his whole character that I just explained, of him now he's actually taking action, and even though it's just him kind of talking at people, and we don't know if that's going to achieve what he wants or not, it's very much what he thinks is the right thing to do, is to promote that idea, regardless of if it's going to help his side win or whether or not the outcome's going to be good. It's a good thing that it's something that he really truly believes is a good thing, but normally he would be too afraid to do, and now he's actually stepping up and doing it, which is a very healthy moment for him. That's why it feels satisfying, because regardless of if it's morally right or wrong, I think that's the problem, is people wanted an answer as far as what is morally good or morally wrong. And I don't think the ending is as like supposed to be as like, oh, this is great as people are saying. Like, I don't think it's supposed to be morally I think it's kind of morally gray in the sense that we don't know what happens next. We don't know if he's gonna, how he's gonna reveal it, what's gonna happen because of it. It's just the ending feels good because it's a healthy moment, for it's Lawrence kind of accepting change. So yeah, he goes up and gives a speech, and his growth throughout this film is very much to take action and do what he thinks is right. He already has strong beliefs about what he thinks is right and good. It's just about him putting that into action and doing it regardless of if he's afraid of the consequences or, whatever. And I think if you look at his character through this lens in the whole film, I think it becomes very clear very quickly because, as he goes along, he very much he does not want to become the Pope. And, he goes up to people and he tells them that. And then he, there are all these secrets that he's looking for. And he does what he thinks is right. When he talks to that woman about, I don't know how to say his name, Adeyemi? I don't know. But, yeah, that moment when Lawrence is kind of inquiring into what happened with him, and then later on what happened with, what's the old white guy's name? Tremblay, something like that. Yeah, when he's inquiring into these things, and especially when he breaks the seal of the former Pope and goes and looks for this stuff, that's not a very morally good, that's a very morally gray action. You might even just say bad, but it's a very healthy moment for him because he's taking action and doing what he wants to do, which is his arc. It's a very positive arc, but the outcome, and I think the outcome at the end, we'll talk about that once we get there. But yeah, it's his character really growing very healthy throughout the course of the film. Yeah, I just got out of the theater. I would like to be able to go through and take notes of every moment where that happened, but I don't have that. So that was just definitely the impression I got, which was that I think the kind of point of this film, the theme was very much about his character growing to be able to take action and do what he thinks is right rather than just believing it and not doing anything. And we see, his peers, he talks to his friend, Bellini, I think, about oh, you should be the one. And then Bellini's like, no, I'm not getting enough votes, so let's vote for Tremblay because we can't have this guy. And it's he's very complacent, whereas Lawrence is no, you. And also the moment where Bellini comes back and, apologizes, I felt that moment felt very poignant or just satisfying, I guess. Kind of a powerful, emotional moment. I don't know if that moment really has any depth to it, but it worked for me. Normally I would rewatch and figure these things out, but since it's in the theater, I can't. But that moment really resonated with me. I don't know if there really was much going on beneath the surface, but it worked for me. Same with the moment of Lawrence kind of telling Adeyemi that he's a good man after discovering that about him. And I think that's another example of kind of people think this movie is pretty morally, or some people are saying this movie is pretty morally binary, and I don't really feel that. I feel there's a lot of stuff that's kind of interesting and a bit questionable. It's not like Lawrence is just this perfect guy and everything he does is great and everything he agrees with is the good thing, and it's more complex than that. Yeah, I thought that moment of him telling Adeyemi that he's a good man was interesting because Adeyemi really wanted to be Pope, and he's very much sad about that. And then of course we had I should not have recorded here. Yeah, Adeyemi is very he wanted to be Pope, and then we had that moment earlier about anyone who wants to be Pope probably shouldn't be, which I think is a very valid sentiment about power in the world, but it's just not realistic. Sometimes there are people who want power who are just kind of good people, and I don't know if he is. ADME. I don't know if he is, but I think really what they're saying is, Lawrence is saying is you can change, and it's like if you really truly have changed and repented, then you're a good person, which I just don't really, I mean, I don't really think in terms of people being good or bad, so I kind of reject that whole framework personally. But like I said, there's interesting stuff going on here. It's not simple. And so I guess I'll talk about the end, right? Of course, it ends with, what's his name? Benitez? I think Benitez. Yeah. It ends with Benitez giving the speech and then immediately winning the election, which, I thought this was kind of bad just because he immediately won. And of course, he probably won by a small margin. They don't tell us, which I think is cool. But it does feel a bit, I don't know. It feels a bit cheap and unrealistic after seeing, where the votes have been distributed and all the other all the other parties stand. It feels a bit cheap. And also, I just really didn't like the presentation because we didn't see who Lawrence voted for, and it felt very as if it was presented as if it was kind of obvious, and I wish there was more tension. It's like maybe Lawrence writes in his vote and kind of looks around and doesn't look like it doesn't feel like anyone else is gonna vote for him. The music felt very kind of triumphant or positive, whereas I wish it was more kind of dreadful or anticipating, maybe more sound effects there instead of just the non-diegetic music. I could be totally remembering this wrong, but I'm pretty sure that's how it was done. But my main problem is that this big change happens, right? He gets elected, which is first is oh great, he's the perfect guy, yay, everything's won. And then we find out that he is has, what is it, he has a womb and ovaries or whatever, and which obviously is going to be a controversial thing, and it's going to bring more conflict and controversy. And I think that's why the moment at the end when Lawrence is hearing people cheering and he's kind of yeah, it's him realizing, I think, that the good thing happened. The person who he thought fit to run got elected, and that's a good change according to him. And even though it's going to bring conflict and uncomfortable situations in the future, he should be happy because something that he thought was good happened. But again, like I said, I felt like this film was kind of so far about his character taking action and doing what he thinks is right, and at the end big moment is something that he didn't do, which can be interesting, and I do think it is interesting. I just think the film would have been stronger if, let me propose my rewrite, okay? So imagine he gives the speech, right? And then we do the election, right? And then we see the votes, and then we see that neither him nor got everything. It's maybe a three-way tie of them at 30-something votes with Tremblay or somebody else, right? It would be really interesting if Lawrence got maybe 20 votes and then Tremblay got 30-something, and then the Benitez or whatever his name is got a teeny bit more, but none of them got the full votes, right? So they have to do another election. And then, what's his name comes to Lawrence with the information about the medical surgery that was going to happen, right? And so then Lawrence goes and confronts, what's his name, Benitez, and he's yeah, this happened, but, I've always been a man, and I, decided not to do it, which that's another thing, by the way, morally interesting, is him saying, I decided not to do this because I respect the body that God gave me or something. That feels, that's I feel like people are talking about this it's some, kind of pandering, liberal, whatever, but that's, yeah, I don't really agree with that sentiment. Yeah, so imagine he finds this out, and there's about to be another election, and it looks like Benitez is going to win, right, because he got the most votes, and my idea would that be some people voted for him because they think he's the best, but then some people, maybe we could have a conversation between Lawrence and his friend being you should vote for Benitez, and he's but he's not going to get enough votes. But then in the second election, we see that or in the next election, we see that he's neck and neck with everybody else. So now everybody's oh yeah, we're going to vote for him. And then Lawrence finds this out, and he has to decide, am I going to reveal this and then he's not going to win, or am I going to conceal this? And then he decides, because he thinks Benitez should win, he decides to conceal it. And then Benitez wins, and then we kind of have that moment at the end, and then we cut before, anything else happens. I think that would be really strong, because it would be way more morally gray than it is now. It'd be Lawrence, because earlier he just gave up information willingly because it was the right thing to do, and now it would be him intentionally withholding information because of who he thinks should get elected, which is, I think, definitely not a good thing, but it's who he thinks is undoubtedly the best for the position, right? And so I think that would be a moment that's super healthy for his character, but very morally gray. But then you could argue the outcome, because he's getting very clearly the best pope elected, would be, it'd be very morally gray and very interesting, and I think a very fully completed, healthy arc for his character. And maybe I wouldn't have liked that as much, but I feel like that would have been a much stronger film. And that is a kind of major rewrite, because it's the ending, but it's also not major. I think the groundwork is very good, and I do think the route they went with is very interesting, because he didn't do it. He needed fate and just kind of the outside circumstances to give him a little push to get the thing that he wanted to happen. Because it wasn't Lawrence's doing that Benitez got elected. It was kind of, from his perspective, it was just luck. I think it's interesting, this idea of Lawrence is being really healthy, taking action for himself, and then in the last moment, this big thing that he really thinks is good just kind of happened on its own. And now he's at the end, he's oh God, what's gonna happen now? But it's good, and he kind of has to accept that, because part of his character, this being afraid of the world, is kind of this fear of the unknown, and it's being afraid to make the decisions that you want to make, being afraid to do the things you want to do because you're scared about what might come along with it. And so the kind of world just giving him kind of this push towards that. I think that's very interesting, but I do think my rewrite would be stronger. I'd love to have seen that film. If I think if my rewrite happened with the same filmmaking, acting, and all that, I probably would have called this up there for film of the year, maybe film of the year. I guess I'll go over my kind of criticism. One of my criticisms first, which is that I think the presentation. I think the cinematography is pretty good. I like a lot of the colors in red. I wasn't paying too close attention to that stuff, but I think one thing I didn't like so much was the music. I don't think it was bad music. I liked it, and I don't feel like it was used that poorly. I just think tonally it was a bit too maybe over the top and superhero action movie cartoony for this film that's very serious. I don't think it fit the tone, and some of the sound design was very in your face, and I probably would have liked it to be a bit more subtle at times. But apart from that, I don't have really any major critiques, apart from my one critique about the ending and how it could be more well written. So yeah, I just watched Conclave. That was my thoughts, which I think are maybe a bit unpopular. I think some people are kind of just oh, this is great, and then the other people are nah, this is Oscar bait and cringe. And I don't think that's, well, I just don't think that matters. I don't like using that. I don't like calling films pretentious. I don't like saying, oh, you were trying too hard, or oh, you're taking yourself too seriously. I like meeting films with whatever they're trying to do and just seeing how well I think they accomplished it. But yeah, I liked it. I thought it was good. Thanks for watching.